You can follow us on the YouTube Live channel for WRMN, and you can also listen in on our the streaming service at WRMN or WRMN1410.com. So it streams there. Comes in real well. I had it plugged in and had it on the AirPlay on my car, and it was really nice. No static like you would get if you're more than 10 miles away from Elgin. So you can still listen to it on your radio, just stream it in. So, as again, I'm going to do the old veterans call out. If you're a veteran and you're a member of Veterans Association or have anything veteran related and you want to get the word out on the air, just give us a call in at 847-931-1410. That's 847-931-1410. And you could text it to 505-926-1410. Or you can hit us up in the comments on the YouTube Live channel. All right, so last week we talked a little bit about the FBI and how now we're seeing some arrests for attempt support of terrorism. And right after that happened, there was another release from our good friends at the FBI from Fort Lewis, Washington, or they call it Joint Base Lewis McChord, because there's the Air Force base there and the Army base, and they combined them for administrative purposes. But apparently there was 2 active duty military members, Army members, and another former military member that were conspiring to send information to China. And the one thing that got me on this was they hadn't actually sent it, but they had received some payments, and they finally got caught and indicted. And on the indictment, it doesn't say that it's actual classified information. So in the government and military, specifically in the military Department of Defense, we have classifications: top secret, secret, and confidential. Those are classified. That is classified information. So if you're going to leak classified information, it's one of those 3. However, there are other categories, and it used to be called simply FOUO, for official use only, also restricted distribution. But they covered all that stuff that isn't one of the top 3 under controlled unclassified information. So that's what they were charging them with leaking, the controlled classified information. And, I went to the stories, and I expected to fully see that these guys were working out of the SCIF, which is a secured classified information facility. It's also called secured compartmentalized information facility up at Fort Lewis. And I was surprised that these guys were only in the field artillery, and they were supply sergeants. So they were in supply. And I'm figuring they did have secret clearances. Well, they give you a clearance for secret. They don't classify you secret, but you have a clearance to view secret information. That doesn't mean that you can view all secret information. You have to have access, and you have to have a purpose for that access. So if you're working in supply, a lot of the numbers of what you have and some of the equipment that you have is classified. So you have to have that clearance to do that. But if you're supply for a field artillery, and suddenly you're checking out secret classified information for psychological operations or for special operations, well, that should raise a flag, because you're outside of your scope right there. So, Paul, what do you think I
was looking at this, and the first two, Tian and Duan, they were trying to get information about the Bradley and the Stryker, and that was their deal. And then the third guy was trying to get information. His name was Zhao, and he was trying to get information on the HIMARS. Now, again, as in last week, it's more interesting in the press release at the end of it than anything else because, again, we've got two U.S. attorneys, Jeffrey Barrow and Catherine Riken, but they're also being helped by trial attorneys from the National Security Counterintelligence and Export Control Section. So they're using different people other than the traditional prosecutors on this. And it's making me wonder if this isn't going to be geared up to be a new thing, because it's almost like these people have technical knowledge that the trial attorneys couldn't get up to speed on. And it's almost like these other people are going to handle that part of the prosecution, maybe at trial or in negotiation. So it's really kind of strange. And then it's also weird that postal inspectors and customs people were involved in this. And it's almost like they've got a lot of what we would call background noise that they're developing into something. And it really is unusual because you usually don't get trial attorneys from other units or like I think the last one was from the State Department or something like that. You usually don't get that in a regular prosecution. I mean, you might get it in a tax case, you might get it in a securities fraud case, but it's unusual that you're getting it in these counter-espionage type things. And that's very unusual. And this, to me, tips off something of a greater, maybe a greater plan out there or something. I don't know.
Well, one of the things, and I just heard a news brief that came on this channel specifically about them changing the focus of our Cold War intelligence gathering, which towards the end of the Cold War became a very electronic, all right? Electronic eavesdropping, radios, even, the satellite imagery, other types of imagery, right? But what they dropped off for a while was human intelligence, and the Chinese have always been big on human intelligence. So what need is there to hack a system if you can just convince some guy to go inside and bring the stuff out to you, all right? And when you're talking about the counterintelligence guys, all right? So counterintelligence is funny because there's always been they fall under human intelligence for some reason. And back in the day when I went through the language school, I was an interrogator. And the people that rocked out of the language school, they had trouble with the language school, not because anything. Some people have better, some people are language sponges, some people are language rocks, So I needed a language cement drill to put it through my rock of a brain to get anything. I had to work real hard on it, but I made it through. The guys didn't make it through since they're already set to have like clearances and they had the scores. They would send them to counterintelligence. So they're counterintelligence agents and they have investigative powers. And everyone looks at them chasing down foreign adversaries. They're chasing down, the Russian spies or the Chinese spies or whatever spies. But in reality, their main job is to make sure that we're not just giving away the information. They're there to plug the leaks. And they have investigative powers within the Department of Defense. So if these people were only going to be charged by the Department of Defense for violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that's where they would come in. But when you have something, federal crime being committed by a service member or on a base, and then it's the FBI's purview. So the FBI is supposed to be our nationwide counterintelligence defense. So they're supposed to be plugging the gaps on this intelligence. And if they find someone, prosecuting them. But they're also looking for espionage. But the focus should be on our people giving this stuff away. Because we have people, it's well known, it's common knowledge. We have people overseas doing the same thing that the Chinese and the Russians are doing to us. It's not like it doesn't happen. So you got the counterintelligence agents in because they know about these spy networks. They know about how the networks work, how this stuff gets leaked, you know, how people get this stuff. But the most important thing on that is, like, if I give you like the tonnage of a Stryker vehicle, how much it weighs, right? Pretty much common knowledge. How many bolts it uses, common knowledge. A lot of the stuff could be found on the open net. We called it the dirty net, but it's on open source. It's open source out there. Anyone can get it if you look for it. But when you start picking up one thing and then another thing and then another thing and putting them together, or extrapolating other information from some things and putting it together, now it gets to the level of classification where you're targeting something. So just because you have, if you put, there could be 50 pieces of information separately that are all unclassified. But when you put those all that information together in regards to a Stryker, suddenly it becomes classified. Suddenly it gets to the level of secret. You know, then you got a classified thing. So you need the counterintelligence people to explain to the layman outside of military intelligence why it's important, because they're going to go, well, all they did was like, it was common knowledge, it was out there, and that's all they did, is release some stuff that's common knowledge. How can you charge someone with theft if it's already out there? You know, if it's already, you know, someone already gave it away, you just give it away to someone else. Is that it? So where it gets to that is, like I said, rather than hack a system, if you get someone to bring that out, and if you have specific information that you want, that you know, you're putting all together, it becomes classified. A story, one of my guys, they asked us to do an open source assessment of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but the country of Georgia. And my guy had really good knowledge of Eastern European languages, excellent knowledge. And he accessed all the open source on the Eastern European websites, not just US websites. And he got so much information, and he put it together in this very good report, because that's what he did in civilian life. He could do reports, he could organize stuff and everything. And he organized it great. He put these dossiers together on these people. And when he briefed it, they classified his briefing as top secret. And they took his computer away from him, his personal computer, because we had to do this on our own internet. You know, they took it away from him. They degaussed it, just wiped it, just took the giant magnet and wiped out that hard drive. And they took his report that he did, and they classified it above a level that he had access for. And so now you got these guys there, and they're like, one of the things they were doing is they're pulling hard drives. Now, they are supply sergeants within a Stryker brigade. All right, so they're with the field artillery, but they're with the Stryker brigade, and they have access to the property books. Now, property book is just a catalog of all the property in that entire brigade and in the division, right? So all the property's there, and it's all cataloged, and there's code numbers for it. They call it national NSN numbers and national security, national stock number. So everything's got a national stock number and then a serial number, you know, and then the amount of it and how many are there and whether it's in good condition, everything else, how many times it's been repaired. That stuff's all on a database. It's all on these hard drives. As they update the systems and move over to a new system, a smaller computer, as we know, every 18 months, these computers are doubling speed and capacity. So the Army's going to upgrade them too to keep up with the enemy, right? And so what happens now is they got all these hard drives laying around, which are classified kind of at a secret level, but people, they've been laying around. So these guys, the operatives that are looking for this, all right, they say, hey, those are just useless hard drives. You know, they're just going to junk them. They're just going to throw them out. I'll give you $1,400 for them. And these guys are like, hey, no one's looked at this stuff in a while. It's gathering dust on the shelves. So they're going to ship that out, hoping that they'll get discharged before these things show up, or that no one will count them in the next property. And the next time a commander takes over and they go through all the property. So there's where you get it. There's where it's important, you know. And these guys, a little guy, but he might just have that one piece. He might have one piece, but they're not doing it to just these two guys. These aren't the only two guys. They're hitting everyone across the, you know, lots of people. They identify weak links. They identify people that they think will be susceptible, and for reasons, money, because money, sex, you know, that's always the honeypot one, the sex one, right? Power, prestige, or just because they don't like their boss, or maybe they like the country more than they're serving in, you know? I forgot the word for that. I should know it. I should be dragged in. I'll remember it later. Ideological. Their ideology doesn't match, you know. And all right, so back in the day, we had a problem in the National Guard and the reserves. They would recruit these guys, and this is going back to domestic terrorism, right? So the gangs would recruit these kids. And these kids normally didn't have much criminal record or anything. And since they didn't have a criminal record and they're like 16 or 17, they would recruit them to join the military, like mostly the reserve and guard, because you're not going to go overseas, right? So they would go to basic training and they would get some either infantry combat training or how to use the radios or whatever training. And then they would never show up for drill again, because they just took the training and they're recruited by these reserves. Well, an ideological person, right? They can recruit them to join the military, to get this training, right? To get the training. And then once they're in, they're their conduit. They are their faucet of information. And no one ever really knows until it's too late. So, and the way you would think that the background checks for the clearances would alleviate that. But there are flaws in that, massive flaws, massive delays, unbelievable stuff, because it's become artificial intelligence. And an 18-year-old kid going into the military who has no jobs, never had a job, went to the same school, lived in the same place, joins the military. He's going to go military intelligence. He fills out his SF-83. It takes him about 10 seconds, all right? And then it goes through, the first thing it does is go through the computer and they look for red flags. And of course there's no red flags. So they send out a guy to interview his third grade teacher. No one says anything bad about him because he was a homebody. No one talked to him. That doesn't raise any red flags. And inside of 6 months, he's got a top secret security clearance. Because he's got no life experience, which is perfect. Because they say, well, nothing said he would do this. But some guy with long list of life experiences that joins the Army later in life, or maybe moved around a lot while he was a kid, because you have to go back 10 years on the secret. You got to go back 10 years of your life, right? So they that raises a lot of red flags. And these guys that they have more visibility on and everything, it can take them 3 years to get a top secret clearance. So guys that you can actually look at and say, oh, this guy's honest as heck, he's proven it, right? They're waiting. And the guy that you have really no idea of, except that the computer, the artificial intelligence and the computer didn't raise any red flags, so they just gave him the clearance. Now you got those sleepers in there. And there's where you have to have the counterintelligence guy to articulate that, especially to a jury of laymen. Did I go too long on that, Paul?
No, that's good.
Yeah. So the now what they're going to do is, you remember with Peyton, what was his name? Manning?
Yeah.
But he changed his name to a girly name or whatever. There's one of those kids, right, that was 18 years old, that had zero life experience, that, boop, they don't check it. No one goes in depth to check his social media or to talk to his peers, his 16-year-old peers or anything that were his friends, that might say, well, this kid was a real ideological psycho in school, right? But his teachers didn't know it because they never talked to him. Boom. He gets the computer, artificial intelligence, no red flag, give him top secret clearance. Boom. He walks out with all this classified information, sells it. All right. Was there anything in his past that would say it? There may have been, but there wasn't really enough to go on for the computer. So what did they do? They put down all sorts of draconian things rather than go back and do a better background check on the people, a better check for access, especially ideological, right? Ideological, a better check on that stuff. They make it so draconian for everyone that's already working to get access to the information. And the thing was that they pulled that access out of military intelligence and they gave it to the communications. And communications controlled who had access, not who was read on for it, but who could get access to the SIPR nets and everything. And that was backlogged for like 9 months. So you could be sitting there, qualified, got everything, and now you're waiting to do your job, and you got to wait 9 months for the communications people to give it to you. And they just went draconian on that, which puts us back and puts us behind the 8 ball with our adversaries, because when we get back, we're going to break soon.
We got about
a few minutes.
40 seconds.
Okay, so when we get back, I'm going to roll this into terrorism. And how it applies, because you'd be surprised. What do you think, Paul?
I think it's a good idea.
All right. So, no, I'm trying not to go on where I'm dropping classified information. There's like procedures, because the main protection of this information is not the information itself so much,
And how to find it.
is how to find it and how we got it. Our sources and our methods to get this information. The information could be like, oh, everyone knew that was there, but we got proof because we used such and such source, such and such method. All right, here we go. See you back in a couple minutes. Who got rounded up by the guys, the federal officers. But Dennis, so you know, because you asked what happened with them, the only thing I could really tell you is that he was processed and he was sent to an ICE detention facility in Indiana. They used the Clay County Jail in Brazil, Indiana. So he's there. Last I knew, he was there, and his family could bond, I guess, get an ICE bond if it's set. But they didn't go in there to get him. They went in there to get his stepson, and it was the U.S. Marshals. So the stepson was wanted on a warrant. So it wasn't really a raid, it was a service of a warrant. So the stepson had resided there. So when they got the warrant, they had the right, through that arrest warrant, knowing that that was that kid's, where he resided,
Yeah.
to search the house. And they find the guy up hiding in the attic, the male of the house, who should have answered the door. So he's cowering in the attic, and the federal marshals went, oh, I wonder why he's hiding. And then they ran him, and there was the deportation order out on him. So then they called ICE. So had he not had a poorly behaving stepson, they probably would have never rounded him up. Or he would have been one of the last ones. Oh, he worked for 20 years here. And just to go off on that is like, okay, he worked for 20 years here. Under whose Social Security number was he paying the taxes? So who benefited from that, right? Are they going to collect that money back from Social Security that he paid in and put it into a general fund, or is it all going to be under that number that he paid in under? And again, whose number was that? And if he wasn't paying taxes and he was working for a construction firm that didn't do the proper things, who's going to go to jail for that, for hiring him and keeping him employed on that? So, yeah, no, it's not really a victimless crime.
You know, I have an interesting story about that, and I don't want to use an actual name, okay? But there was a TV show called Chips.
Yes.
And there was a character called Punch, okay? And he was played by an actor who had a name. And I'll just abbreviate it, EE, okay? Yes. And I was working election duty with my partner, Carol, who is partially Hispanic. And we were working in Berwyn area, okay? And I think it was, we walked into the New Century School, okay?
All right.
And as soon as we hit the door, one of the guys said, "Are you the police?" And I said, "No, we're state's attorneys." And they go, "Well, you'll be wanting to go see Punch, okay?"
Yes.
And I said, "Okay." And there was a real long hall that we went down, and then we turned, and there was an even longer hall, and we got into the front of where the voting area was. And they go, "Who are you?" And I said, "We're state's attorneys." And they go, again, "You'll be wanting to see Punch," which the real name was EE, as it were, okay? So we go up, and there's a guy sitting behind the desk, and I said, "Everybody's telling me we'd be wanting to see Punch." And he said, "Well, I'm Punch." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "You know, I've been working for 20 years, and I know there's a man working at Zenith that's been working under my identity as Punch, EE." And he goes, "He came in to vote today, and he said, 'I'm Punch, I want to vote.'" And he goes, "You're not Punch, I'm Punch." And he grabbed him, and then they ripped the voting ballot, and the guy ran out the door. So, you know, if you're here illegally, maybe don't do a crime. You know what I'm saying? And it was kind of funny.
Yeah. So, okay, so that is stuff that I would almost call on a level of domestic terrorism. So, you know what the intent of terrorism used as an act of war, right? What the intent of it is.
Fear. Yes, it's to instill fear and anxiety in people.
Well, in doing that, the actual end thing is to overturn a regime, to replace a regime, to overrun it, to overturn it. And when you create these acts of terrorism, which aren't overt actions of war, you know, firebombing Dresden, yes, an act of terrorism, yeah, terrorism, but it was actually during war, so they kind of knew it was coming. There was kind of nothing they could really do about it. But when you have a guy like the shoe bomber, right? The shoe bomber, this is a small act of terrorism. And now you got to take off your shoes, and they got to wipe it with some material to see if you got explosives in your shoe or whatever, right? You can't go, you got to take your shoes off, all this stuff. What it's doing is it's creating not just an inconvenience, but for everything they do, the government's going to try to prevent that. And when they try to prevent it, they have the government never does anything in partials. They always go draconian, overboard, massively overboard. And it's not just an inconvenience. It could cost you money, time. It could destroy your business, but they're trying to protect the overall public. That's like protect everyone. And after a point, everyone gets so upset with the draconian rules of the government where they're trying to protect people, but the more draconian rules you could put in, the more you direct those rules, the more power you have. It's a vicious circle on that. The people get tired of that. they'll get tired of the overwhelming kind of dictatorship of government telling you how to live your life completely, and they'll overthrow that government, or they won't fight for that government anymore. Then the enemy that's been creating all these little actions that make the government take draconian methods, right? They win because they come in and they replace that government because everyone's looking and says, well, even these guys aren't that bad. So they could be okay. And their ultimate goal is to overthrow by causing the government. So everything they do like that affects you. So when it comes to them grabbing data by using the human thing, they know that rather than prevent the ability for these guys to get the information out, they're preventing people from getting to use the information, which puts us behind, all right? So anything like this could be considered an act of terrorism. As we know with gun laws, right? So I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I'm such a big Second Amendment guy that I believe that the Second Amendment should be interpreted as a well-regulated militia, which is every person in the United States that is a citizen should be required to carry a firearm. Unless you're a convicted felon, then you should be required to wear a big F on your chest so everyone knows you're a convicted felon. That's just me, so I'm kind of overboard with that. But when you have these mass shootings and some guy gets a sporting rifle, I believe assault rifles are just the name. It's a terrorist act. Assault, it sounds bad, right? Assault. Sporting doesn't sound bad. So it's a matter of the words you use. So then they take that assault rifle thing and they go, oh, we're going to protect the whole public by banning them. Does it protect the public? No. Because guess what? People that are going to commit these acts and do it, they don't care about the law. They're not all Batman. Remember, Batman wouldn't even park illegally in an emergency.
That's true.
All right. As a police officer, there are two places I wouldn't park my squad car: handicap parking or on a fire hydrant. I'll park in a bus stop. But handicapped or fire hydrant, I want to do it, right? I'll block the whole road. But there are people that won't obey anything, and they're the people you got to worry about. So they put these background checks in, and what did the background checks do? They flat out fail. Hunter Biden. How did the background checks work with him? They didn't, all right? So he was able to purchase a gun illegally, but because he lied about it. So, what are the other? So the government will use that to pass the draconian laws, and everyone will say, oh, they're just trying to protect us. Like they say, if it saves one child. Well, okay. But how many children can you do the reverse of that, right? So when you pass a draconian law, looking at like lockdowns and everything, oh, this is where I get a thing against elitists, right? The elitists out there. They're going to tell me how to live my life or how I need to live my life because they're smarter than me. They're smarter than me. There's a lot of people that are smarter than me. But when I go into a grocery store and I'm not sick and I'm not feeling sick and I don't care, and some stock boy, some 50-year-old stock boy comes screaming at me that I can't purchase my groceries because I'm not wearing a mask. I'm like, oh, what who put this guy in charge, right? But the elitists say, oh, we could do this, and it's a controlled thing. It's overbearing. They make the law. They make these overruling things. But can you prove that those masks didn't kill people? And if they killed one child, were they worth it? Because a lot of people were wearing these things improperly, wearing them over and over, sharing them, and they became infected with bacteria. Kids are breathing in the bacteria, and then kids die from pneumonia. So if the masks kill one person, are they worth it? But no one ever sees that correlation. The greater benefit. Is the greater benefit always a good thing? No, it's not.
They're always worried about the greater good instead of what is good.
Yeah, well, that's the best way I've ever heard it put, Paul. Can you say that again?
Yeah, they're always worried about the greater good instead of what is good.
That's right. And you shouldn't be afraid of doing the right thing all the time. Doing the right thing all the time, unless it affects your personal or your family's safety. It's not right to commit murder to kill someone else, but there's self-defense. All right. Preemptive self-defense, however, that's where you get into in depth to it. And that's where we get to governments doing preemptive attacks and preemptive self-defense, taking out powers that haven't done anything yet. And I think we were talking about that last week with the FBI in these cases, where we're talking about attempt possession of a controlled substance and attempts material support for a terrorist agency. Attempt. They didn't actually do it. They attempted to. And then they're not even showing an act in furtherance. They're showing, well, they thought about doing an act in furtherance, or they planned to do an act in furtherance. They got all right, so if you have conspiracy, right, to rob a bank, you got three people saying, well, we're going to rob a bank. Well, what are we going to need? We're going to need a stolen car. So some guy goes on and steals a car. That's an act in furtherance, right?
Right.
But if they go, well, we're going to rob a bank. Well, what are we going to need? Well, we should steal a car. And then they lock them up for conspiracy because they said they should steal a car. That's not an act in furtherance. That's a thought. That's free speech. But if you have, here's another thing, all right? If you have a challenged person, a very challenged, mentally challenged person, or intellectually challenged person, and maybe someone won't agree with this, but I don't remember the scientific term, but it's pinhead syndrome. So the person is profoundly challenged, both mentally and intellectually. But he was an adult, like 16 years old, not adult, but grown. He was grown, and he could handle certain mechanical functions. So the Latin kings were using this guy as a shooter. So in that case, if you said shoot a guy, right, and this kid's holding the gun, and you have control over him, that's kind of like, you're as a prosecutor there, how would you prosecute the guy that told the pinhead, I'm sorry for the term, the pinhead kid to shoot the guy?
That's what we used to call a criminal enterprise. That's or an accessory before the fact, an accessory after the fact, an accessory to the fact. Like years ago when they're forward go in a car and you grab them all, they'd all give you statements, and none of them were the shooter, but you knew that one of them was because somebody got shot. So then you'd get them all on an accountability theory because they were all there at the same time and knew. So he would be there on an accountability theory as prompting the guy, and in many ways he would be the actual ringleader because he got the poor mentally challenged person to do his bidding.
Yeah. I think I got off on a tangent there, but so again, how instead of like throwing this TSA up there, right? Throwing the TSA up there and throwing, now we have the thing called the real ID, and soon you won't be able to fly even domestically unless you show ID. Back in the day, you didn't need to show ID to fly domestically. You just needed the ticket. Here's my ticket, let me on. Because you had freedom of travel. That's your right. You're a U.S. citizen. Now you got to have this real ID to prove you are. Well, I got a driver's license, and supposedly by federal law, the only people that could drive in the Department of Transportation in the United States are someone with a U.S. driver's license, except for the NAFTA drivers, right? So now the states start giving out driver's license in violation of that to illegal aliens. So they got a driver's license, so should you let them on a plane? Well, because... but I got to go get a real ID. I got to jump through hoops to get a real ID because the state went and gave driver's licenses to people that weren't entitled to them. So in that case, I would say I would want to send a bill for my time, for the $20 they're going to charge me for that ID card, to the state of Illinois, to Pritzker, and say, here, the only reason I have to get this is because you gave out driver's licenses to illegal aliens. So here's my bill, $150. What does he charge? What do you think if he was actually working as a high-level lawyer, he would charge an hour?
At least $650, maybe more an hour.
All right, here's $650 bill for my time. That's not unreasonable because that's what you would charge. But we don't have enough people to do that, to stand up for that. We're not going to have like 100 people buy out an airline, or 200. Let's say 200 people buy out a flight, right? They got a whole flight, they got tickets, and none of them have a real ID, and they show up with not a real ID. And Southwest says, well, we can't let you on the plane, but I'm a U.S. citizen. Well, you need a real ID or a passport to go. I got a driver's license. Federal law says you can only have that. So we're not going to have actions like that because it's not valuable to our time because we have jobs, we work, we have other things to do.
We have lives, and those people just have concepts.
Concepts, yeah. That's another good one. I like that. And we have lives, they have concepts. So all I could say, and I'm not trying to be political about this, but when any government agency or leader shoots for another overbearing regulation on everybody to protect one person, right? You don't vote for that guy ever. Because they're elitist. I'll protect you all. Here, sooner or later it'll be no one can leave your house. We'll deliver Meals on Wheels to you with what we want you to eat. So don't leave your house. That way you won't get killed in traffic. Okay.
You'll just be dead of boredom then.
Yeah. So I'm so then the other thing, and this falls on everyone, right? So you hear about living off the grid, right? And people are afraid that their cell phones are tracking them and they shouldn't have the right to do this and they shouldn't have the right to collect information on you, but people freely give it to them, absolutely freely give it to them. I freely give out my information, right? It's all out there because I've given up because you would really have to try hard to get all your stuff wiped out. And to get all your stuff wiped out, guess what you would have to do? Give your information to the person that wipes it out. And if you don't think they keep a database, you're wrong. So I had a couple car problems that involved transmissions. And guess what keeps coming up on my Facebook videos leads? Transmissions. These guys are fixing this transmission, they're fixing that transmission. I never looked at this stuff. Transmissions. They kind of confuse me, especially the automatics. I guess if I looked at them more, the regular engine I could do. So I really had no interest, but I had a problem with my transmissions, right? So that information, when I put in the information, the car manufacturer's webpage, right? And I'm logged on there, which means I've given them information. They know what type of cars I got. My insurance company has that. And I logged in and I says, well, I'm not getting this transmission problem fixed. And then all of a sudden, boom, how did Facebook get that stuff? It's all shared. It's very hard for you to keep your information off of there. On top of that, it's called phishing. People give this stuff away, right? So you look at your Facebook or any other social media page, and it says, what's your? It asks you just generally out there. Someone's posting it. So I got 3 minutes. I could do this, right? 3 minutes. It goes, what's your month? What's your gemstone for your birth month? And people put in, oh, I'm sapphire, and they're like, oh, that's September. Boom, and they put your name or your Facebook login, your Facebook personality, and they put that in September birth month, right? And then they say, well, what was your mother's maiden name? And your mother's maiden name, give us that information. We'll tell you whether you'll be a millionaire in a year. And people give that stuff out, but all that information is gathered, and then they extrapolate it. So individually, my birth month isn't classified, right? But you add everything together, and you got all what the Army would call personal identifiable information, all right? And that's like HIPAA stuff, right? So if you got that information on someone, you go start trying to access bank accounts, trying to take out loans in their name, trying to, sell their house without their knowledge. You get all that information, but you gather it up and then you extrapolate stuff. Well, he said this sapphire was his birth month stone, so he's born in September, and then the first 2 days of your month mean that you're this spirit animal. And they extrapolate all the information, they put it together, and they got a pretty good dossier on you if they go to target you. So it's almost impossible to not let that happen, but you can not make it easy for them and don't give it away for free. Or like I just like to say, lie to them on social media. I was born in January 1st. I'm 79 years old. Or I'm 354 and still collecting Social Security. That was, that's insane. That's insane. All right, so
Don't give too much information out.
only give it to legit sources, all right, for legitimate reasons. Don't get stuck by this. Don't get bitten in the back. And when you see these feeds on there, think back a couple steps to see how they got that information. I figured it out. Okay, that was it. That was from the car manufacturer. All right, we'll see you next week on Chief Guard of the Republic, every Saturday, noon to 1. Want to read some action-packed, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tooman, now featuring the international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available